thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and I put it all over me.
This 11-year-old girl survived the horrific Uvalde school shooting by covering herself in her classmates' blood. The traumatized girl's father says tearfully, "She's not the same little girl I used to play with." Details of how the shooter could enter Robb Elementary School in Uvalde and kill 19 students and 2 teachers over an hour perplexes all of us. The gunman has been killed. It was the deadliest school shooting since the murders at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut in 2012. Gun violence is an urgent and complex problem. The players such as individuals, family, peers, community and socio-cultural factors flow together to create such happenings. Along with many things, psychology can make important contributions to policies that prevent gun violence. We will discuss the problem, its predictability and its possible preventions in this video. This is Vikrant. Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe and like to help us make better videos ahead. Now let us jump into the first chapter. A mass shooting galvanizes public attention. Although the public mass shootings are relatively rare events, media coverage and general public discourses around such incidents create a far-reaching impact on citizens' mental health and also affect their perceptions of safety. The definition of a mass shooting varies a lot, and there is no standard definition available. But the common approach is to set a casualty threshold of 4 fatalities by firearm, excluding the offender or offenders. I am about to. That's what Salvador Ramos, the 18-year-old mass shooter of the Uvalde incident, texted a girl from his Instagram account. He also added, "I got a little secret I want to tell you," then added a smiley emoji with a hand over its mouth. But he never messaged the girl again about the secret and went to the school to massacre innocent school children and teachers. He was a school student with a very few friends. It was the last week before the incident when he turned 18 and legally purchased 2 assault rifles. His background check reveals a bullied loner with no criminal record. On October 1st, 2017, a 64-year-old Stephen Paddock opened fire from his hotel room in Mandalay Bay on the crowd attending Route 91 Harvest Music Festival on the Las Vegas Strip in Nevada, killing around 60 people and wounding 411. The incident is the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in US history. The motive of the shooting is still unknown. FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit published a report in January 2019 that said there was no single or clear motivating factor for the shooting. The stock prices of firearms manufacturers rose due to investors expecting the gun sales to go up due to increased concerns that the incident could lead to more stringent gun control laws. This usually happens after every other such mass shooting. As per the Small Arms Survey of 2018, the US has a ratio of 120 firearms per 100 residents, which has jumped from 88 per 100 in 2011. Incidents of mass shootings are difficult to track as they are yet to be properly defined. But still, according to the FBI, which tracks the active shooter incident in the US between 2000 to 2020, there were 345 such incidents that resulted in more than 1,000 deaths. Despite the clear upward trend in such violence, only 52% of Americans want stricter gun laws. Gallup has been tracking this since 1990, when the stricter gun law demand was at a record high at 78%. They say that the gun control requests have increased when a major mass shooting incident happens and goes down when the memory of those incidents fades away. This chart here shows the number of deaths per year due to mass shootings in the US. Since the tragedy of Uvalde, there have been shockingly many such mass shootings in which a gunman has killed multiple people. 4 people killed in Oklahoma on June 1st, 1 killed and 7 injured once again in Oklahoma on May 29th. 4 killed and 11 were injured in Philadelphia on June 4th. Where exactly is the problem? There is a major stereotype surrounding this issue, that mental illness causes gun violence. Slowly, as society sees them in this light, the medical term mentally ill becomes a sign of violent threat. In the US, there is a frequent discourse that focuses on the impact of mental illness on mass shooting incidents. Like in this tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, the media discussed how the killer, Adam Lanza, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. In the next chapter, we will discuss if the assumption that mental illness causes mass shootings is true or not. There are certainly shreds of evidence that suggest mass shooters are often mentally ill or socially sidelined. Also, it's certain that mass shootings indicate that we need to invest more in mental health or gun access control. But when we see mental illness broadly, that is, when we consider the diverse range of population, the assumptions start becoming thin. This type of solution is very easy to reach. We are not considering other factors that can create this event and still acknowledge the possibility of missing out on a few. Only considering mental illness would not only be unsuccessful in preventing mass shootings, but it would be mostly of no use in preventing general firearm injuries. Not only this, but we are also avoiding the stigma and the rejection that people who are recovering from mental illnesses could feel when people around them assume them to be dangerous. Gary Brucato and his colleagues from the Department of Psychiatry, Columbia University, analyzed around 1300 mass murderers of all types around the world. They found that only 8% of mass shooters had a serious mental illness. The rate was found to be 18% among people who committed mass murder through non-firearm, such as fire, explosives, poison, etc. Finally, they came to a conclusion through these findings that more than the mental illness alone, there are other difficulties that require emphasis in the prevention of such incidents. In a similar way, the FBI study of 63 active shooter incidents between 2000 to 2013 found that 25% of shooters had a mental illness of some kind, ranging from minor to more serious disorders. They concluded, formally diagnosed mental illness is not a very specific predictor of violence of any type, let alone targeted violence. These findings clearly suggest that mental illnesses alone rarely cause violent behavior and are not reliable predictors of such gun crimes. As Gary and his colleagues rightly concluded in their study, there are other difficulties that require emphasis. We will try to delve into these difficulties in our next chapter. It can be said that there is no common feature that emerges from all the mass shootings. Every incident has its own triggers like substance use, shooters, economic distress, housing insecurities, and even social isolation and politically extremist inclination or ideology, etc. So instead of just focusing on diagnosing the shooter alone, we need to check other places as well and come to a broader understanding. Ironically, we also got to know through this research paper on the screen that mental illnesses are most likely to make a person socially isolated and intellectually unorganized, and therefore the chances of him committing a complex gun crime become very less. So this proves that mental health alone is not the factor that we should be focusing on. In a project funded by the National Institute of Justice, the research arm of the US Department of Justice, Gillian Patterson and James Densley built a database dating back to 1966 of every mass shooter who had killed 4 or more people in a public place. For this, they interviewed perpetrators and their families, shooting survivors, read through several media, medical records, suicide notes, etc. From this, they found that mass shooters are not exactly alike. But the collected data did reveal 4 commonalities among the perpetrators of nearly all the mass shootings. First one, vast majority of mass shooters had experienced early childhood trauma and exposure to violence at an early age. Second, almost every mass shooter had reached a crisis point in the weeks or months leading up to the shooting. This also leads to a change in their behavior. Third, most of the mass shooters had examined the actions of other shooters and searched for validation for their motives. They appear to be socially contagious and tend to come in clusters. Fourth one, the shooters had the access to all the means to carry out their plan. For example, it was found that in 80% of school shootings, the perpetrators got their weapons from family members. The most important step to start preventing such events is to deprive the potential shooters of the means to carry out their plans. We can make the potential sites less accessible with tight security measures. In this same bracket, we need to better control weapons through age restrictions, permit to purchase licensing, universal background checks, and red flag laws. Another step that can be taken is by changing the way we consume, produce, and distribute violent content on media and social media. A little step like avoiding sharing violent content on social media can be really helpful. We as a society need to be more proactive. It is found that most of the public shooters are suicidal and their crises are often well known to others nearby. A vast majority of shooters leak their plans before time. We need to avoid the fear of overreaction and start to take more seriously the potential threats around us. Everyone should be trained to identify the signs of crisis and take the right actions to prevent them from escalating further. This also extends to proactively addressing the early traumas of the younger population. We should make counselors and emotional learning programs easily accessible. For many years, there has been minimum funding for gun violence research. It's been recently only when the appropriate funding has started pouring in. The mental health experts, researchers, and other disciplines that can complement each other should come together to build a framework that can study gun violence as a complicated public health crisis and suggest the best ways to prevent future events. As we saw through the available findings, it is very much clear that mental health alone is a tiny factor in explaining, predicting, or preventing mass shootings. These events have a web of many individual and social factors such as trauma, history of the individual, substance dependency, unemployment, and easy gun accessibility in the community that may interact in complex ways to lead up to mass shooting. Most importantly, the prevention of such events is a collective responsibility of all of us. A broader understanding of gun violence among people, researchers, and political parties could lead to better policy solutions for this alarming issue. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you have any feedback, you can write it in the comment below. We will see you at the next one.